evening. Welcome to another session from the Wiser Sound. How are you doing? How's your week been? In the snow and the ice? It's going now. That's good. It gets a bit crap on it when it ices up. But it weren't bad for a couple of days. How's everybody's week going? Last one before the Christmas. So next Sunday is Christmas Eve, isn't it? So what's been going on? Well, lots of nonsense as usual. Not really worth even talking about because it's just garbage. Theatre, everybody's playing the role, and Charles is still hiding up in Scotland. Doing knighting, by golly. How can you do knighting when you're not the king? How can you possibly do knighting when you're not the king? And as a reminder, Claim of Right Act 1689, chapter 28 says that by the law of this kingdom, no papist can be king or queen of this realm, nor bear any office whatsoever therein, nor can any Protestant successor exercise the regal power until he or she swear the coronation oath. Okay, he's taking up regal power, this tossbag, and he's not the fucking king. Are you awake? No, you don't even have a clue what it is to be England, dear. So we're all UK British. Anyway, never mind. So just so we just remind the tossbags at the top of the tree that this is all garbage. Anything he does or doesn't do between now and the coronation oath being taken is null and void, garbage, as is, as we explored the claims against it by the psychos in Canada. No offence to Canadians. We're just specifically speaking about the fruit bats over there in Canada. So somebody sent me something very interesting today, so much so I think we do have to speak about it. We'll go through it. But the majority of this will be a follow-on from last week's again. Might be boring for people, yeah, fair dues, but this stuff is going to be important in the new year. So if we've already covered it, we have an idea so that when they're being brought back into the game later in the year as we move to understand who's at top of this no-hide system, this data is very, very important, to say the least. So we'll just move over to this first. So this is an apostolic letter issued motu proprio of the Supreme Pontiff Francis on the instrumental legal persons of the Roman Curia 6/12/22. So that's a recent release. Now, I read it today, and I have to say I haven't comprehended it fully, and I haven't managed to read it again because putting the data together for what we're going to speak of later has took me about 3 days. So I've been pretty hard at it, and I needed to get back to that just to make sure it was okay. So I haven't read this again, so I don't fully comprehend what it's saying. It says, apostolic letter issued motu proprio, blah, 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 we've done that. He who is faithful in very little is faithful also in much. And that's Luke 16:10 is giving you there. It says, following the overall reform of the institutional structure of the Roman Curia, which I have implemented through the recent apostolic constitution, Praedicate Evangelium, it is also necessary to regulate the various funds, foundations and entities that over the years have arisen with the curial institutions and are directly dependent on them. So of course this comes after they've shifted everything into the Vatican Bank by the end of September. Although these entities have a formally separate juridical personality and a certain administrative autonomy, it must be recognised that they are instrumental to the realisation of the ends proper to the curial institutions at the service of the ministry of the successor of Peter, and that, therefore, they too are, unless otherwise indicated by the norms that establish them in some way, public entities of the Holy See. Right, so he's making it clear there that they're actually beholden to the Holy See, as is everything else, including the Vatican. Now, notice there, they've used American English in the word recognised. So if we go back old school, there's only two languages allowed in a Roman court, and that is English, and French. And I've said before, in my opinion, that they've done what they've done to the American English in order it can satisfy the Noahide system. So you can clearly see that this fruit bat is operating entirely for this new system that the elites want to put in. It says, since their temporal goods are part of the patrimony of the Apostolic See, it is necessary that they are subject not only to the supervision of the curial institutions on which they depend, but also to control and vigilance of the economic bodies of the Roman Curia. In this way, considering Canon 1161 of the Codex Iuris Canonici, instrumental legal persons come to be clearly distinguished from other foundations, associations and non-profit bodies, which, although based in the Vatican City State, are nevertheless born from the initiative of private individuals and are not instrumental to the realization of the ends proper to the curial institutions. They are governed by their own statutes and not by these norms, unless expressly provided otherwise. Therefore, by the present apostolic letter issued motu proprio, I establish Article 1. So this is the unless expressly provided otherwise. Article 1, scope of application. These regulations apply to instrumental legal persons, meaning those entities that refer to the Holy See registered in the list referred to in Article 1.1 of the Statute of the Council for the Economy and located in Vatican City State, with the exclusion of the curial institutions and offices of the Roman Curia, the institutions connected with the Holy See, and the governorate of the Vatican City State. See, I'm still not comprehending it fully. Article 2, institutional supervision. The curial institution on which the legal person is canonically dependent oversees the proper functioning of the entity in the pursuit of its statutory purposes. To this end, it shall appoint and replace administrators or legal representatives if they do not meet the requirements of good repute referred to in Article 7.1h below. B. After consulting the directors and the internal control body, annul acts that are contrary to the law or the articles of association. The annulment of the act shall not affect any rights acquired by third parties in good faith. Dissolve the board of directors and appoint of an extraordinary commissioner if the directors have acted in a serious breach of the law or the articles of association. D. Assess the contents of the legal entity's business plan, with the possibility of providing indications as to its compliance with the purposes of the articles of association. E. Analyse the minutes of the body entrusted with the administration of the legal person, which must be forwarded to it, with the possibility of submitting comments on the compliance of the decisions taken with the statutory purposes. And F. Express its evaluations on the correspondence of the acts of extraordinary administration to the institutional purposes for the ad validatum approval of the Secretariat for the Economy. Express its observations on the draft budget and balance sheet before they are presented for approval. So I'm still not comprehending exactly what this is talking about in truth. Is this all legal persons that come under, is that everybody, or is this just particular to the Curia? So I'm not sure. I'm sure you guys might be twigging it, so if you do, get some comments in and we'll see what you make of it. Article 3, Economic and Financial Supervision and Control. The Secretariat for the Economy shall exercise supervision and control over instrumental legal persons in accordance with its statutes. In particular, it shall A. Analyse the accounting records and provide assistance and support. B. Having consulted the curial institution on which the juridical person is canonically dependent, issue authorization ad validitatem for acts of extraordinary administration. Appoint the chairman of the board of auditors, or the auditor, or sole auditor, were envisaged by the statutes of the entities indicated in a special list approved by the Council for the Economy, verifying their integrity, professionalism, and the absence of conflicts of interest. D. Conduct on-site audits. Analyse the performance of economic and administrative management and make recommendations on any corrective actions that may be necessary. The Secretariat for the Economy, having consulted with the Financial Supervision and Information Authority and the Office of the Auditor General to the extent of its competence, shall adopt or recommend the adoption by instrumental legal persons of appropriate measures to prevent and combat criminal activities. Article 4, Accounting Entries. The instrumental legal persons shall submit to the Secretariat for the Economy the budget and the final balance sheet with the deadlines set by the Secretariat. At the request of the Council for the Economy or the Secretariat for the Economy, the accounting records must be submitted to the Office of the Auditor General or to an external auditor indicated by the Council for the Economy. The budget and final accounts of the instrumental legal persons, together with the reports required by the statute and the law, shall be forwarded to the Secretariat for the Economy, which shall submit them to the Council for the Economy for approval. The administrative body of the instrumental legal person, before submitting the budget proposal for approval, must obtain the opinion of the crucial institution on which it is canonically dependent. Article 5, Exchange of Information. The crucial institution on which the legal person is canonically dependent, the Secretariat for the Economy and the Office of the Auditor General may always have access to accounting records, supporting documents and information concerning financial transactions, the identification data of associates, beneficial owners, members of governing bodies, volunteer service providers, donors, beneficiaries of the activities, or, where it is not possible due to the nature of the service, the categories of beneficiaries. The authorities of the Holy See and of the Vatican City State shall exchange information for the purposes of the performance of their institutional functions according to the rules in force in the state. So we're at a bit of a loss if we don't understand the rules of the Vatican City State. Are they the same? They're the old ones? Are they new ones? Are they no-hide? Or what? This is going to get interesting. I'm sure we're going to have to come back to this at some point. Article 6, Extinction and Devolution of Property. Apart from the causes provided for by the law, the deed of incorporation or the statute, instrumental legal persons shall be suppressed and put into liquidation by decree of the curial institution on which they canonically depend, when the purpose has been achieved or has become impossible or contrary to the law, or in the case of associations, when the reduction in the number of members prevents their functioning. The decree shall be communicated without delay to the Prefect of the Secretariat for the Economy. 2. In the absence of a specific provision in the statute or deed of incorporation, the curial institution on which the juridical person is canonically dependent appoints one or more liquidators. Once the creditors have been satisfied and the assets devolved, the liquidators must draw up the financial liquidation balance sheet and transmit it to the Secretariat for the Economy, which submits to the Council for the Economy for approval. At the indication of the curial institution, this is 4, on which the juridical person is canonically dependent, the liquidators shall see to the devolution of the residual patrimony to the juridical persons indicated in the deed of foundation or statutes. In any other case, it is devolved to the Apostolic See. Okay. Thereafter, the Secretariat for the Economy communicates the approval of the liquidation balance sheet to the President of the Governorate, who, by his own decree, acknowledges the extinction of the entity and orders its cancellation from the register of juridical persons. The accounting records, documents and data referred to in Articles 5 and the company books of the suppressed entity must be deposited with the legal office of the Governorate, which provides for the preservation for a period of 10 years from the extinction of the legal entity. Article 7, referral to Vatican law. Notwithstanding that which is otherwise provided for by present norms, the general provisions established by the Vatican law in the following matters shall be applied to instrumental legal persons. A. Requirements for the constitution of the legal person. B. Registration of the legal person in the register of the Vatican City State. Compulsory corporate books. registration and preservation obligations, measures to combat money laundering, the finances of terrorism, and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Well, how are you supposed to go on when you've admitted genocide? Does that come under some kind of terrorism as well? What are you playing at? F, non-profit and voluntary organisations if applicable. So these have all to be referred to Vatican law. Administrative sanctions, requirements to be met by members of the management body and liquidators. And 2 in the Article 7 is the prior authorisation of the Secretary of State is required for the establishment of instrumental legal persons and for their registration in the Vatican City State Register. 8. Article 8, transitory rule. Existing instrumental legal persons must adapt to the provisions of the present motu proprio within 3 months of its entry in force. I decree that this apostolic letter issued motu proprio be promulgated by publication in the Osservatore Romano and subsequently inserted into the Acta Hospitale Sedis. All that I have determined in this apostolic letter issued motu proprio I order to have full and stable effect. Anything to the contrary, notwithstanding, as from 8th of December 2022, given in Rome at St. Peter's on 5th of December in the year 2022, the 10th of my pontificate. So, and it's signed Francis in uppercase. So that's meaningless for a start. Well, it's actually not meaningless. It has big meaning, does it not? So maybe I'll redefine that. So as I said, and still on the second reading, I've not really comprehended what the hell that is really talking about. The structure of the Roman Curia. So at first glance, it's looking like it's all to do with this Roman Curia, but I'm pretty sure and guess it has something to do with all the sort of assets that have been shifted into the Vatican Bank. By golly. So, I don't know what you make of that, because I don't know what I make of that yet, because I haven't comprehended it. So, what do you think? Hello, says Untitled, looking forward. Hello there. Paul Sefton, evening Sean, evening to everyone. Slipknot says, alright Sean, alright everyone. Evening to you three guys. New Pit, hello, good evening Sean, one and all. Mark says, good evening. Public note, hello Sean, man, woman and other entities. Untitled, see you live next Sunday. Oh, I was at a blank. Try and get me to Christmas Eve. I don't know what crack is yet. I don't even know what I'm up to, so I don't know. I will, if I'm not, I will put some up on the YouTube so that everybody at least, if you cock a wink towards end of week, at least you'll know one way or other. Feeding logs to the fire all week, says the Mew. I don't blame you. The price of this gas is obscene. It's ridiculous. Of course you will. Oh. Slipknot says 6 watching, 14 Intel watching. More than likely. So I only published this piece on website just before we started. I thought, well, I don't want to give them any chance to see what I'm up to. But I don't think they're going to matter. It's important stuff, this, and it's not being derogatory. In fact, this data actually lets everybody off the hook if they can grasp that everything they think they're in, everything they think they believe, is based on your own non-application of reason and logic to a simple part of the biblical script. Namely, you all believe you're operating by default in Genesis 1, which is the original creation, heaven, earth, plants, animals, man, 7-day gig. And I know that when you talk to people, if I talk to people that follow these traditions, you only need to talk to them for a minute about this subject, and straight away they're using all the verbiage afforded to Genesis 1 because they haven't comprehended, because they haven't given it the appropriate examination. They've no concept that they're actually operating in the garden, which is separate from the original. They assume incorrectly that they're on Genesis 1, and the reason why the garden bit doesn't twig is because they haven't looked at the words. Now, I'm not getting into this, which is the true, the real. That's not the truth that we're discussing here. I'm not even talking in that depth of it. We're talking basically, and I'm saying, if you can see that by not applying the correct study to those two pieces of words, you're fooling yourself. Because you believe you're on this, but you're in this. So it's nothing to do with which is true, which is false. I'm just basically saying to you, if you want to be really deep in yourself, i.e. making sure that you're operating correctly to what's real and not the fantasy, you have to recognise that that's what's happening. And as I said, I'm not interested in what's true, what's not. We're not going that deep. This is just basically to show you. Those sleight of hand blags that we do to ourselves out of laziness, because we're copying, because we've already heard a narrative and we're making it fit. Yeah? That's what we're all doing. That's what everybody does. And it's not just in relation to religious stuff, it's in relation to letters you receive through the post. You're not reading the words, you're not comprehending the message. You're editing it off on this little sleight of hand we do to ourselves, which is major. Because that's at the source of it, and the further out it goes in like a fan, the more absurd your outcomes are going to be. Because you're off the mark. Can you dig what I'm saying? So I'm not getting into the ins and outs of, which Genesis story is correct. They're both correct. As a story, describing a creation that you are in, one way or another. Okay? But I just want to show you that failure, because you do it in everything. If you're watching TV, you're not listening. You're not listening. You're not taking part and absorbing what's being said and computing it in your mind. You're running on this falsity that everybody does. Everybody does it. So, the degree to which you can accept that and analyse that from now on in your life will determine how much clearer your vision of everything and perception of your experience will be. Because that's the problem. Everybody is fooling their ass off and blaming everybody else. No, it buck stops with every single one of us as individuals, because we are the deciders of everything we do. That's where our power lies. Inside with us. So we're deciding how we communicate with people, we're deciding how we see people. And those are based on these such narratives that we've got going in outside ourselves, based on how inappropriately we apply ourselves to whatever's before us, whether it's written, whether it's spoken, or whether it's a visual. We're interpreting that based on our own bubble and nonsense. And that is just, I've used that analogy because every single person that claims to be a Christian or a Jew or even a Muslim, you're way off. And it's on, because that happens so many times with everything you study. Is it any wonder we're in this mess? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that just come out. So where are we? It says 2 intel giving shows. Yeah. We have lost a few viewers. Have you noticed? Don't know why. It's what makes me as well. I find that people are great on stuff, until, and this is another one that people might want to take on board a bit, because again, the only person it helps is you. And if you can go with it, you'll see the difference between person and man. Because it's just that fault alone puts you in assumptions, presumption, and you've no concept of it. Is it any wonder the system that's based entirely on presumption and assumption is the one that's got the power and the one that's in play, because everybody's acting in it. Do you get what I'm saying? It really does come back to us as an individual. It's the only thing, it's the only game on the table that you should be playing right now. You know, whatever's going on outside and around you, be there for people, but ultimately right now, you've got to put your effort into you. Get rid of the mist in your own bubble, and you'll see clearly. You'll see a lot better, and it does start to change your life. So I was saying, yeah, people are fine, aren't they? Until until they have to look at themselves a little bit, because you've the speakers that entered. I was fine while I was talking about them over there and them up that side, but me, I'm already perfect. You did. Come on, this, some of that. I'm perfect. I don't need to care about that. What are you talking about, man? And away they go. Fair enough, but at least know that that's again not applying the correct format to what it is you're picking up, written, visual, or audio. You've got to pay attention to it, you know. So videos can be good for that because you can stop it. You're taking notes. It's a good way. Sometimes it's even better than books. Yeah. Anyway. So where are we? We've got 2 mods. 2 mods we've got. So they've let me back in and they let me do it. So I must have been a good boy. I don't know. Jay says up today finds you well. Yep. Public notice canonically according to or ordered by canon law. I don't know what it's trying to say. It does look like it's sort of reflecting on the Curia, but I don't know how that plays. See, I don't understand the Roman system really, as a sort of an adherent would. I don't understand it at all. If anything, I understand the English law better because that's the country I grew up in. But I'm not so sure what that means. But the fact it's using legal persons and not speaking in terms of associations and incorporations, is it talking about the initial entry without surname, or is it talking about sesquivit? I don't know. It's weird. So that does need to. But I only got that today. Public notice says not living. It's all guidelines towards the new CBDC currencies. Well, I'm thinking absolutely it's going to be that, but I don't understand. I'm not comprehending what it actually means. How does that pan down on the street? You know what I'm saying? How does that affect you and me? That's what I wanted to know. Just contacted the right guy in Canada about you. Just talked about wait for the what? Just contacted the right guy in Canada about you. Just talked about wait for an answer. Oh right, fair dues. Okay. Yeah, because that's what we're all doing. That's why we're in, by default, the realm of presumption and assumption. Nobody's made us do it. It's because we have lost the capacity to see that that's where we're at, but more importantly, by what mechanic are we stuck in that? You know what I'm saying? Because then you're sort of going out there and going, oh my God, these people, what are they doing to me? They're just doing the shit. If you're following it, come on, last 3 years, you've followed the Pied Pipers, who are now having it thrown back at them, only because they're just going to disappear and they've done their trick, they've done their shit. You need new faces to hate, and you'll forget all about them. Like Boris, everybody's forgot about Boris. Hancock, you're only still talking about him because he's just been in I'm a Celebrity. You know what I mean? And I could see Stockholm Syndrome spreading across Blighty because they were all feeling sorry for him and thinking, he's just lovely. No, the guy's a fucking idiot. The guy's a shithead and had the goal to stand up and tell you all to do everything you've done. In my book. You can see it as you wish, but it is important that we all realise we're in the predicaments we're in because we're born idle. But, as I said, we've had the keys removed. We don't know how to get out of the labyrinth. But there is no string there left, is there? You're all in it. You're all finding your way out of it. And you're given the experiences that you're formulating with your third eye because that's what's manifesting. So, how important is that? You're in the world of presumption, assumption because of that mechanic. And you can apply that to every aspect of your life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, not everybody's like that, of course, but that is the human condition, which prevents you from being man and a bit more focused to exactly where the hell you are, instead of going, well, what are they doing? What are they doing over there? What's he saying? He's my favourite celebrity. Oh, I must follow him. Yeah. Answer within, always. Because it'll put you on the path to best show you your error, whether it's become a mistake because you keep repeating it. And if you're going through the experience with that mind, you'll usually come out of it with the answer. You know, usually you come out of these events, but you don't have the answer. The answer was there in the little shindig that you were experiencing. But you weren't seeing it because you weren't functioning at that point where you would see that answer as a key. You just saw it but ignored it because it wasn't included in your reference. Your points of reference for how you understand stuff. Anyway. You got off being a man if Christian. Of course you are. If you become anything with a label attached to your name, you've incorporated it, have you not? But even your name, are you your name? No, only if you actually. It's just something that people mutter that gets your attention. So, ID, oh, I'm looking at you, I'm flesh and blood. Look, I'm talking to you. Gob's going. Can you not hear me? Gob's going. That's me. That's ID. But they're not after that, are they? They want to do business. So they need you to say that you are the Sescovy Trust, which is your Christian name, incorporated with a surname. So you become a corporation. Not a trust on your Christian name. You're a corporation. And because you've incorporated your Christian name with the surname, you're now surety for it. So that's what they're after. But until you ingrain that in your being, which again is what it's all about. Read the words. When your brain says that's what it means, write it down and program yourself to that's what it means, not what they said it meant. Because they've told you what it meant so that they can do that ID on you. Because you don't know. You know what I'm saying? It all comes back to us as individuals. And today, right now, there's never been a more important time for you to take that on board and practice it. Because, people are going to on their own pass everywhere. Be there for everybody that might need you. But you ultimately cannot control their path. They're going to do it all by themselves. You know what I'm saying? Focus on yourself. Where the hell are you going to... Where you see yourself in 12 months? When you can see what they're trying to do. If you're not focusing to that right now, you're not going to give yourself the little things you're going to need. We're going through this winter now. Prices are sky high. Next year, you might turn it off. Are you prepared? Were you too busy fussing about this over here that you have no saying whatsoever that you forgot to get some means of heat off grid, just in case, or candles, or torches, and batteries, just things like that you don't want to have to accumulate on day they announce something. You want to be content that if they announce it, well, it's all right, I've got that. Maybe I'll just get a few more because they've said. Do it that way. There's no running out of stuff in supermarkets unless they take it off shelves and then pretend like they did for the last few years. And everybody believed it. But if you've got your stuff together, they can do that game and you just all go, oh, it don't fucking matter. I'm fantastic and amazing. I've already sorted it. You know what I'm saying? And then we start to think off-grid. We're all talking off-grid. Things can start to happen off-grid. Do you know what I'm saying? Understanding that your gas and electric is prepaid is another, would be a worthwhile endeavour for you next week, let's say. Then put it into practice. Job done. Peace, easy politics. Innit? You don't have to get excited. You don't have to send letters off everywhere, liens, etc., etc. Just a couple of letters, bit of effort, sorted. But, you know, that's just the way I think. Jungo says, English Constitution is a solution. It is definitely a solution for majority of people, because to just understand what it is to be a citizen would be the easiest method by which you can pull in authority to force your legal system, to force your civil state, your politicians and your crown to do what is right. And that, as we started at the beginning, no Protestant can take the regal powers until they've signed off the coronation oath. This fucking big ear pillars up and down agitating and sticking swords on folk. Null and void. You've got psychos in Canada trying to nick all our stuff because they hate us, because they believe we nicked theirs 14,000 BC. But no, they've held on to that angst for centuries because they've got nothing about them and better to do, and now they want to become what it is they hate and throw that around. You've got Abos in New Zealand. I believe they're getting the water rights now. But this is the elect of them tribes, not the general, population. Who are they? And what are they going to do with this water? Are they going to start acting goat here? You know what I'm saying? Peloponnese. It's no good. You can't be doing that. You nicked it once, remember? You can't just stop hanging on to this angst stuff. The time to deal with stuff like that is when it's happening. So like now, as it's happening all over Europe, in America, in Canada. A lot of Chinese elite now, one of the biggest search engine terms in China is, how the hell do we emigrate? And Canada is a big pull for them. So obviously, Canada, through Trudeau, or what's he called, Cuban geezer, Castro, Justin Castro, is so tied in with the Chinese model. There's your sign for it. If the Chinese rich and elite are Googling, or whatever it is they have in China, how do I get that out of here? And Canada looks like a good option. There you go. So that's a sure sign that Castro has got you well bagged in with the old Bolsheviks over there. And we're going to look into that now, because I think there's a damage limitation being set off as these they're not hidden from the aristocracy, etc., but more hidden in the alternative media as having responsibility for the situation we've got, i.e. the incorporation of all governments, all being administrated under that bankruptcy by the United Nations on behalf of the central banks. So we don't need to know this crack. I'll just race through what you say. Name, and a constitution, of course, but look, when you do understand the English Constitution, they were smart cookies, our ancestors. Regardless of which side of history you want to be on, they were smart, and what we came out with was a good constitution. But of course, you are an English citizen. Now, you're going to have to stick at that, because all the powers you need are within that jurisdiction, English citizen. And it's achievable by the majority of people if you want to rebel, by far. And enough, as an English citizen, you can keep off the shit as well. That's why the English realm is a good one. So that's why I say it can be a solution. But ultimately, you don't want to be a citizen, a subject, a king, queen, or human, do you? Really? But that's way beyond the majority of people. So obviously we're looking for remedies everywhere. That's why England is a remedy in and of itself, if it's enforced correctly, which means if it's pulled into the courts, therefore determining the jurisdiction of whatever it is you pull it into a court. How's that? People go, we can't fight King's Bench. No, the King's Bench is a jurisdiction in every single court on the planet. It's, again, a misnomer. It's not, it's this court over here and it has this statue and these things. No. The King's Bench is the King's Justice. If you want the King's Justice, you have to bring it in to that building by definition of the verbiage and the written work you put in there. So running around London looking for King's Bench, you know what I'm saying? It's no. You can go to your local court and form it into a King's Bench on your own fruition. You don't need permission. You don't have to pay any cash. You only do that in the Star Chambers. Anyway, if you stand your ground, they can't arrest you at all. Well, even if they arrest you, who gives a fuck? Come back at them. That's the thing. You know, unless you're prepared to start knocking them out, taking the guns off them and shooting them, these coppers, which you're not going to do, are you? You're not. The population are nowhere near that kind of mindset. Then you're going to have to let them do what they do, because you're going to go after them after. You know, that's the situation you sort of have to set up for yourself. This is where your statutory declaration. Because if that's the instrument you decide to use, then you would build everything, your actions that you're going to. So if you decide who you are, set that up in the statutory declaration, send it off to the correct bodies, accept the contract in the conditional acceptance. It's enforced, but then you have to behave exactly in the manner in which you've declared yourself. You can't start toss-assing around and acting like a clown, because you've set up a contract then with whomever you send this to and get the contract in force on the conditional acceptance. You can't then start acting contrary to that, can you? As you're a dick. You know what I'm saying? So these are the points you've got to really come to grips with if you're going to set up your own who you are, and then work out how you're going to present that, how you're going to shove that and move that in the mix. And once you've got that situation together, then if they arrest you, well, that's fine. It's not fine, don't get me wrong. But it would have to be an acceptable part of the path you're prepared to get on if you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do. So again, take responsibility for your actions and the possible consequences, but even in full knowledge that you can come back off that as well and come back at them. Again, it's not something that you just consider it as part of the shindig that you're going to have to experience, maybe. Never give your name. Well, exactly. Or make it clear that, oh, you want to do business? Well, that's fine, but you just need to understand that I'm the beneficiary of that trust. And of course, we need a trustee if we want to move forward. But lo and behold, here you are before me, Mr. Policeman. You are now a trustee, fiduciary obligation. How the fuck's this claim going to benefit me? Pal. You know what I'm saying? First, look at who you want to be. Who are you? And then put it in writing. And if you're happy with what you've put yourself on, or you think you can improve, do a bit of improving. Because whatever you put in that, you better make sure you stick within it. Yeah? You know what I'm saying? So you'd have to consider, so well, what rights am I giving myself to defend myself, my property, my kin? Because you'll have to also incorporate within the declaration or your charge schedule, what are the charges for a breach of that? You know what I mean? This is a big to-do. It's a big thing to work out first. Who do you believe you are? And then how do I put that in writing so I can tell everybody else? Well, then you better act by it. Because you can't start wandering around like some kind of fruit bat. Or you're still in fruit bat land, aren't you? In your court at King's Bench. Any court, you will bring that jurisdiction in based on the language you bring in that court. Period. But remember, big ears is up and down lurching, hoity-toity with swords on folks' shoulders like he's some kind of king. Baby boomers, oh, completely forgot that they shot Diana. Or did they? But they got rid of her anyway. You know, the Ginger Minge over there in the US and his little mole playing their little role here as well. Well, very well indeed. I don't know. Anyway, let me think. Paul Sefton, a person is in legalese is fictitious. Of course, it is. Yes. But if you're being creative and as wise as a serpent, you know, when you learn about these things, you see, there's a big move around today for persons to completely and utterly remove themselves from the system. But have you really considered what that means? But more to the point, have you prepared yourself for what that's going to mean? Because if you haven't, you're going to go and hit a brick wall. You're going to come flat on your ass if you haven't pre-prepared and think you can just swoon off. La 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 la. I don't want to be that anymore, boom. You know, it's dangerous to do any action without giving it full attention, thought, logic, reason applied to it, potential consequences, how you can mitigate the worst of them. Then you're formulating a plan. Then move on your act. You know, there'll be things come in that you weren't expecting, but you've got to be good on your feet. This is why you've got to understand whatever it is you're actually doing and not just run on emotion because you're copying what somebody else has done because they've understood it, but have not first communicated it in full to you, the actual connotations of moving down a particular path. You're in for trouble, which is why it's always better. Take from the outside, but ultimately when you're making your choices and your terminations, make sure it's in synchronicity with the gut feeling you've got, because that's your kingdom within. And if your gut feeling has got any problems with what action you're on, what people are saying, take it on board, but also take on board that your gut feeling to that was there's something not quite right with that. And then if you need to, you should do diligence to find out what it is about that that's giving you that gut feeling. The gut feeling will disappear because you're fully now aware of the complexity of that, whatever it is. You're in the know, you're savvy with it, you can move with it, and you're going to have your best chance of success. Same with people who you trust. Be careful who you trust. Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean to say I'm saying don't trust anybody. You know, trust is, you look into sort of like end of these times, and the very thing that's disappearing at all points is trust. In all its forms. This is why you've got immigrants everywhere. That is the final nail in the coffin of breaking down trust. Because you've got loads of different cultures in there, and they only each trust their own. There you go. And that's why they do it. This is why it's you know, the West was a high trust society. All these lesser societies are low trust. They are low grade societies, and they know it. They know it, but I think they forgot. So they're chucking away an high trust society that they don't even really like because they're excited by jingle jangle and other nonsense that they've got going on inside the bubble. Let's have a look. As I made, and no doubt, and many on it, she was saying you don't pay for your gas electric. You've already paid for it. What do you think your taxes, your national insurance, you get lumps? What do you think the system is they set up? It's to set up so that it'll function for your sustenance, to keep the nation going. No, you don't. You paid for it already. It's prepaid. It's a prepaid system. But you can't attack it through their own verbiage. You've got to attack it at an higher jurisdiction. So contract law is what it is. You're contracted with the company that owns the meter in your property. You have a contract with them. And you've said, okay, I'll use the gas that comes out of your meter. And in that contract, they've said, yeah, we'll offer that to you, but you're going to pay this, that, so that we can change rules, regulations, whatever, please. You've signed into that. So the first thing that has to do, you need to understand how does contract law work. Because you want to know how you can get out of this contract. Because, of course, even if you read the contract originally, which you didn't, because you never do, you're running on presumption assumption, which is why you're fixed into it and can't get out. You do it correctly because you'll find very quickly that it's a breach of that contract, the original idea. But you would have to submit paperwork, giving them notice. You no longer wish to contract with the company. they've given them a period to come and collect their meter. However, most important on this, if you're going to go with this, because I'm not giving you legal advice, folks. I'm telling you what it is, how it is, the system, England, what it is, our state. You also have to take out the tails that feed the meter, because the tails belong to the company. Take the tails, take the meter, and make sure you put both that as this is your property, the meter and the tails, and I have removed it, and you can come and pick it up within 28 days, or you will dispose of it. As long as you put that in writing, registered, there you go. You've given them notice. If they have any issue about that, then they have to contact you before the 28 days are up. But it doesn't matter. You can do and put your own meters in there, because the national grid belongs to you. You paid for it, you built it, they generate the gumption that you agreed to pay tax to it, your ancestors did, in order we had it on tap. So you're just going back to as is, which means you're starting to understand what England is, and not the presumption that you're on England when really you're running around in a bankrupt corporation called the United Kingdom. Okay? Same for you jocks. Even though you hate us English, it's still the same system that gave you all that. The fact that you didn't know that, that's far too much whiskey, far too much aggie squeezing, and far too much sticking knives into each other if you live in Glasgow. You know what I'm saying? Who has just allowed the biggest pile of shit ever to attack England, Scotland, and everybody in Glasgow. I mean, they're bordering on there not being able to be called Northerners. You know what I'm saying? We're going to stick you in Kent, lads, I'm telling you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're Rangers or Celtic. We'll just stick you all in there as Southerners, because you're earning that right to become Southerners, fully fledged. I sign everything VC. Why the hell are you signing anything in the first place, for goodness sake? It's cursive. I mean, you only do VC if it's under duress. V coactus, that's what it is. I did this under duress. What's the duress? Threat of kidnap, assault and battery, and a false imprisonment. And then bummed to death by the mates with, I think the Aggies furs that they make up, them hats that judges wear. I think they use the Aggies itself for bagpipe, and then its mane, they use it for judges' hats, I think. I'm sure somebody told me that once. But I can't remember now. Anyway, just thought. Come on, you jocks, wake up. Install your own meter, they cannot remove your property. Remove your property? No, but you have to make sure you get all their property out. So you put it in the notice, tails and meter. Then there's no contract. Those there now need to come and get the meter. Once you've given them them, there is no contract. They have no right of entry, even though they don't anyway. In the legal system, they come with this because you've got their properties in your property. Alright? So these are the points. This is why you've got to give it your due diligence. But all you're doing is applying yourself to contract law. What does it mean? Are they breaching the initial contract? Well, damn right they're breaching the initial contract. Because the price of our energy hasn't gone up. They've just upped the tariff. A bit like the mortgage. You know, they go in there, they get your signature, you give them access to your estate or your NI account, they pull the money out, but in between you receiving the money that's yours, they've put in this commerce. You'll pay interest, we'll bum you if you don't pay, we'll take your ass off if you don't pay. They've inserted it, you see, and that's the parasite. Commerce. Or war. They're doing war against you. And you don't even know you're at war. You just know that you're thick. But there's nothing wrong with knowing you're thick. You have to realise you're thick in order you can relearn yourself so you're not as thick. And I've been thick. I were well thick once. Even though I thought they were fantastic and amazing, I was still I was thick. You know, totally thick as pig shit. Don't mean I weren't sound in myself, but in the way I viewed the world, in the way I viewed everything, I was completely solid. And I've been getting better ever since. What have we got here? Not your property registered. Well, they have a claim on it, don't they? This is why you need to be looking at selling your house private, maybe even gold. Get a bill of sale, 2 witnesses. That property now has been sold without the inclusion of any registrations anywhere. Yeah? The bill of sale is to prove the sale. The witness is to prove that the exchange occurred. And you can sell your house for 25p if you want. You know, the judiciary can't stop you being thick. And if you want to sell it for 25p and then buy it back next week for 50p, who's to stop you? As long as you've got bills of sales over witnesses, those properties has been pulled out, twice removed because it's had 2 sales, out of the hands of the shagasses. Yeah? And of course they'll go, oh, you've got drains going underneath and you've got water and gas going in. Yeah, National Grid, Water Board. You know, the fact that your corporations has no effect on me. This is another thing I've noticed. United Utilities locking gates now on land that they don't own because of the corporation. They hold it in trust. Who are they holding it in trust for? Me. So I don't give a fuck about your locks on your gates, boys. You don't stop me. Okay? On my little bicycle, on my tricycle. When I'm out on my tricycle, I'm over them gates and just try and say something. Or at least say something if you want, but try and do something. And you will have that bike wrapped around your neck in an instant. And then you'll be owing me a lot of money because that bike cost me a fortune. Well, anyway. Hospitals need a signature for operations. Well, of course. The signature they want is that you're contracting them to give them duty of care. So once you've signed that, whatever they seem fit, whether it's 25 vaccines, if doctor wants to bum you, you know, if nurse wants to do a bit of naughtiness because they're a bit rude, them nurses, and they say that it's for your benefit, it's part of the process of medical duty of care they have for you, then who are you to argue? You've signed in there, contract duty of care. It doesn't mean you can't get out. Of course you can, you walk out, but you're no longer responsible. So if they've stuck you up with loads of shit and all sorts, and then you sign yourself out, and then you start having all sorts, well, you sign yourself out. So again, the best bet is just to never, ever, ever, ever give anybody duty of care. The police are running on it. Have you heard of, well, they got a duty of care. You fucking don't have a duty of care for yourself, you little shit. That's why you're a policeman today. So don't start claiming you've got a duty of care on me when you can't even look after yourself. You know what I'm saying? Politicians, duty of care. Your priest, duty of care, spiritual. MP, temporal. So the book starts with your MP on the temporal game if you're being bummed. And if you're being bummed on the spiritual, you're going to see the vicar or the parish priest. Whichever it may be in your area. That's England. That's how England's set up. It has all the answers to everything. But obviously, through big ears, now hoity-toity with his knife. And nobody gives a shit. So, anyway, where are we? If someone forces for a signature, then don't push it. Just don't do signatures, for God's sake. What do you do signatures for? It's cursive. You say, I am dead. No matter how fancy you write it. You might do a squiggle here and a squiggle up there, and oh, that looks beautiful. It's cursive. It's dead language. You're just saying, I am dead, bum me all you want, I will pay, because I'm stupid. Of course, why can you... Right, let me get this back to you. So a couple comes here and says, we've got ID, say, ID, yeah, I'm here. No. What, define ID. Well, that name you want to give you. What's you say? I won't know you, look, how big. I don't know. It's just you say. You can always come up, I can give you the name I give myself. That's like free life of the mix. I know that's fact because I did it. all by myself. I gave it myself. Way back in the early 90s when I was tossing about with the music. So that's me. If somebody wants a name expressed vocally or written, I know that's a fact because I said it. I give it myself and I've used it ever since. Everything else is hearsay. But, okay, ID, well, have you got a surname? A surname? Oh, you want to do business? Okay, then well, as you know, it's beneficial for the trust, which I have to inform you. You'd need a trustee to do business, but we're in luck. You, Mr. Civil Servant, are that trustee, and you have a fiduciary obligation, so how am I going to benefit from this action? Where's your signature? You can't do signatures as beneficiary. He'd have to sign it. Because he's your trustee. He's not going to do that, is he? Because he's trying to bum you for money. Bum you for points. Well, not you, but he wants you to be surety so he can bum the trust, the SESCV trust, the incorporation of a surname with a Christian name. You're a corporation. You're dead. Surety. That's what they're after. So why would you have to do signatures? Autographs, if you've bank accounts. It's an autograph. And if you can get beneficiary on there, a Benny, even better. It's not a deposit account then, is it? Can't charge it then, can they? You can't work against the beneficiary in a trustee capacity. Get that in your minds, folks. So, I'm missing loads of stuff and all that, aren't I? So yeah, if somebody wants tickets, you don't buy it. Can you see why you don't want to get rid of cash, do we? Don't need a load of your title if you don't register. Well, by definition, you holding a load of your title. And evidence of that is the bill of sale. That this property was sold to this guy for this amount. Done. Remember, your lawyers are there to carry on and carry forth any contracts that property or your trust is involved in. Yeah? That's what it's all about. The last thing you want is a solicitor in anything. They are 100% expert liars. And when they become really expert, they're called to the bar. To bar them from ever speaking fact again. That's it, in a nutshell. Now then. Only if they have a name, agree. No colonial man race, agree, blah blah blah, man race. No curries. I wouldn't sign anything for curries, etc. Why are you signing? Human rights are not for me still a person, natural person. Well, you don't even want to be a natural person. You want to be a person. That's the fiction. Flesh and blood. Man, male, female. Now, you're not woman, are you? That's the garden. That's the other creation. Patriarchy. The original creation, the other one created it, and because we're in the womb of the great mother, everything down here you'd class as Holy Spirit would be feminine, female. They didn't like that, so they had to create a new creation, put the male at the top, or a man they call him, and then create a woman, completely separate. Nothing to do with the female creation in man. They had to create this other little creature that do exactly what Adam said. But she didn't do what Adam said, did she, anyway? So she was a rape woman. So, anyway. So where are you? Creation, garden. I don't care. But the garden is a formation separate from the original. At least know that. It's a copy of an original, and a bad one. Because it takes away freedoms that are afforded to you in the original creation. It removes freedoms. But then might license you if you're a priest. If you go higher up to tabernacle, the Ark of the Contract. Oh, no, sorry, it's not Egyptian anymore, it's Hebrew. Ark of the Covenant, which is the same word, covenant contract. Anyway. So we're goosed. Well, are you goosed? No, the system's goosed. Them that are travelling that path are goosed. Because they can't see off the path. They're goosed. Don't follow them. Start to work out what the hell you're going to do so that you don't have to follow them. Because the last thing you should even be contemplating is following them. You know, they've got Medicare galore, they've got war galore, more programming. They're going to put neural brain stuff in your brain. You know, they've sterilised all the under 30s. It's not good. You have a massive overburden of males over in the East. Purposeful from 1970s in the one-child policy that they kept going. The Chinese, unfortunately, revere the male. All the abortions were of the females. And that's just the cultural heritage. That's just the way the Chinese think. Which is no different from a lot of the Eastern mindsets. It's all about the male, isn't it? And even the Christian stuff. Because it were all patriarchy, the new system. The weed grown in the garden as opposed to the oak born in the original creation. Anyway, I'm not going to have time to do this thing in a bit, but we don't have to do it all actually. Just get it in the mix so we know. Remember, we're dealing with criminals. Yes, we are. I moved house to a rental and I don't contract with the energy supplier, and so far I have not responded to any letter they've sent. Not paid for 9 months, hoping not to get myself in deep shit. Well, not responding as well, you're not rebutting something. Everything they do is they'll throw it out and it gets rebutted. But also work out on this enforcement side of things. They're always going for the easy targets. So if they can't get hold of you, you're not answering them, they're going to leave you, but they're going to come to you eventually. They're always going for easy targets. So that's another point you can keep in mind, and maybe why you've had 9 months so far. But if you've got their meters in, you are contracted with them, whether you like it or not. To break the contract, you have to remove the meters, or you are contracted to receive your energy via the meter that has a tariff. That's the contract. So it's no good just pretending you're not in contract. You have to remove the contract, and that means removing the meter and the tails and putting your own in. Graph of autonomy, autograph sign of nature, signature. Yeah, but you've got to remember you have two trusts. Sorry, you have a trust and a corporation, rather. But it still is a trust in essence. But Christian name is the trust, incorporated with a surname, it's corporation. Do you get me? I'll give you these remedies because each level has a remedy. I can't tell you which remedy is best for you. You can only do that by determining for yourself who you are, what are your capacities. What do you understand? How can you function moving forward? So first you have to work out, well, where are you? Bad stuff and all, because you can't know yourself unless you know all your foibles and your nonsense. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it takes me about 6 hours in the morning just to work through my foibles before I start to get into my talents. In my own mind. You know what I'm saying? That's how full I am of them. Because I'm still full of shit as well, really. I'm just getting better at pooing. You know, so it's disappearing better and quicker. If anyone visits you and asks for the occupier state, you're not at liberty to say it. Well, just say, occupier? Are we at war? Who are we at war with? And watch the little eyeballs go, what's they talking about? Say, I'm not an occupier of anything. Are you resident? No, I'm not resident. I'm making use of this building. And then they go, you say, well, who are you looking for? And you'll give you a person with your surname and say, oh, I'm not the person you're looking for. And they'll go, well, what's your name then? Just go, I'm not the person you're looking for. Now, toddle off and go away. Like that. You don't even have to get smart with him. Angry or aggressive. Just know the lingo. Know the trap that they're trying to get you on. And throw it back at them. You're not the person, are you? You know? Or are you? That's on you. Are you or not? And that comes down to, who do you believe you are? Who do you know you are? The belief, it comes first till you understand who you are, and then it's a knowing. And then you can answer anything that comes your way across your path in the correct format. Alright? So it is important. It's so important that you understand this, which is why helping folk is nigh impossible. Because they're the ones that have to do it. You know what I'm saying? And they use that blag that we looked at originally, where they don't accept that what they're seeing is not what they think, it's this reality. You're in presumption assumption, by definition of your own nature. Pay as you go. Well, that's the best way with meters. If you don't want to do it, you just get pay as you go. And make sure you don't go into the emergency. When you go into the emergency, the price goes through the roof until you've spent a few more credits. Now, the biggest important thing for you to understand is this. When you're not using your boiler, turn it off at the switch on the wall. They use a phenomenal amount of electricity and gas condensing. You will notice a huge amount each week if you just turn that off, because all you have to do is when you go in the kitchen to do your thing, you might have to do one extra thing, which is go in the kitchen and turn boiler on first before you put tap on. It's not the hardest thing in the world. I know it might break your finger. Take the risk. It's worth breaking your finger. You'll save a fortune because that boiler isn't condensing. Because there's no need for it to condense. It only needs to be condensing when it's on. Turn it off. You'll save gas and electric, and you will notice it in a week. Take it from me. Can we start smart meters? Yeah. Don't have one. Annual contract. By installing your own. Yes, you do. You can buy them online. Yes, you start putting them in the council houses first and then give them a choice saying they're no longer having prepaid meters. Well, there's still prepaid meters on smart meters. This house I'm in now has got a smart meters and it's prepaid. So you can watch it go down. Like that. We're going to the Piker route. At the bailiffs and now it's stalemate. I won't bother again. Listen, we went through the bailiffs and your rights. You can throw them out your place. As long as you've done it right and explained to them they need to leave and they're not, throw them off. Yeah, if you need a baseball bat, all the better. But these people, once you've made it clear to them they're trespassing, they have to leave. And if they're not leaving, just go back to that video we did a few weeks ago. There's the rules. Not my rules. I'm not giving you legal advice. Them's the rules that they have to work to. So that means they're the rules the coppers have to work to. But you need to know the rules, because you're enforcing them. You know, the rules are there. You need to know what rules they're under, because you need to know them so that you can make sure. Because then you're enforcing your jurisdiction. Because you're competent in their rules, so you know when they're winging it. Because as we know, they're all happy to talk out their ass, to tell lies, to deceive, because they've all some connection one way or another to people in secret societies who encourage that very character trait. We said about the boiler. Oh, you'll save a fortune, and you'll notice it in a week. We're talking you'll save £10 on your gas and probably the same on your electric. Maybe less on your electric. And it might even be more than £10. When I did this at first, about 15 years ago, it gave me £6 on one and a £7 on the other. I can't remember in which order. And everybody I told did it and saw the thing, and I've done it ever since. Turn it off at the wall. It will not damage the boiler. So when you've turned your boiler off as normal, let it do its thing. When it's stopped, then turn it off. Don't turn it off mid-function. And do that, and it's fine, because it doesn't need to condense when it's off. There's no pressures being built. And when you turn it back on, it just comes on as it should be, and there's no problems. But you will save a fortune. Right, let's get on to this. Well, you big bum face. There we go. Right. So we looked at the Dangor, didn't we? The Exelarch, the chief Arunis of the Babylonian system, self-professed. and the exelarch's possessive foundation. So all the assets, we can say the beneficiary is whomever is classed as the exelarch in this Babylonian system, parading as Judaism. Right? And because of its parading as Judaism, has infected Islam, it's infected Christianity, it's infected Buddhism, it's infected the Sanskrit, it's infected everything. And so we're going to look at two families who we have mentioned before, in sync with the Dangur. It says Babylon priesthood and its influence in India and China. The East India Company of merchants was made up of the Babylonian and Iranian class. Now I say that, we're looking at Babylonian or Iraqi. The Holy See families all claim origin from Iran. You know, we're not talking about current day Iranians, we're talking about way back in the mist of time, the Aryans. So we clearly can see from the get-go, these families that are up there, moving this imperial stuff, are not Jewish, they're not from the Levant, they're not Semitic, yeah? They could be Hebrew, but they're not, certainly not Israelite. You know what I'm saying? They're not Egyptian. They may have been in Egypt in various stages and to various degrees of power, but ultimately these people are distinct, and we can see that through their own genealogies. The East India Company of merchants made up Babylonian and Iranian class parading as Jewish, having secured the control over governments that had big naval power. So this is what they were doing when the empires were being born: British Empire, East India Company, Portugal, Spain. I mean, it was Portugal first, then Spain, then Holland, then England. So all these imperial forces starting to build up, all coming out of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, creating what we know as the East India Companies. So in this report, we should look at two families of particular interest: the Sassoon, or Sassoon as we know them, and the Kaduri. In 1831, it is said that David Sassoon entered Bombay as a refugee, alone and without any form of connection to a foreign land, and yet would become the wealthiest family in India. Such insistence that the audience accept a fantasy has been a signature throughout the histories, written of themselves by the priesthood of Babylon. It adds to the mysticism of an exalted race. So they always present these as we went there on our own, we had no contacts, no nothing, and then become multi-billionaires and control everything. So they're presented as that always because it makes people, it taps into the emotional garbage of, oh, the gods must have been on the side. No, they went there to an already existing network. And the network that is existing is, of course, the secret side of the show. Okay? So they presented always in this manner to make them look even more mysterious or mystical. The idea that such patrons of the craft excel at rags to riches fairy tale has to be seen as the cover for a network installed and ready to become public knowledge. So they've got the networks in these countries. When they're ready to make it public, they'll put in some front. Sassoon David being that very man, but they pretend that they're always running away from something. They're always being attacked. They're always running off. And then God gives them everything in the world because they're such lovely people. Well, are they? Which is why we're going to look into this, because we need to understand this Noahide system is being pushed up there as this super moral system that everybody that's none of this Babylonian priesthood has to obey. So we need to look at those that are going to be atop of this system doing the judging. Where the hell are they in the morality scale? Yeah? Because it's alright talking big out the gob, but what actions are matching what comes out of the gob? None of them. And this is a classic example of that, and I think it's coming at a good time, this little shindig, because they're now damage limitation, putting out contrary stuff to give a picture, so that you do go back to that Genesis trip and not quite see that they're two completely separate creations, and you go off on presumption, presuming that you actually are on that first one, but not, So it's same. This is how they do this. They create the fairy tale, And you edit then everything you read and whatever that goes contrary to the narrative. The idea that such patrons of the Excel crafted switch sphere has to be seen as a cover for a network installed and ready to be in public knowledge. Here is the front for that network. In this case, the Sassoon family, to which all eyes will be guided, allowing the network itself to remain in the shadows. So all focus is on the Sassoons and nothing on the network that were already there and that's giving them the power and the ability to create what they're going to create. For the hapless reader, there is only one emotion invoked. God must be involved in such a miracle. A kudos not born of reason becomes a mystical tale of what are no more than priests of mammon. The world is hoodwinked, history becomes embellished. Within the live streams I present each Sunday at 9 p.m, we have covered the archaeological evidence-based sojourn into all things Egypt and ancient Israel, Assyrians, Iranians, Holy See, the Babylonians, Druids, Scythians, Greeks, Romans, Britons, Prussians, and the technology applied, and how the priesthood itself has full control over the existing religions, as we seek to understand what the 7 laws of Noah, or the Noahide system, is really all about. We understand that the Noahide has been installed by a Freemasonry at the 21st degree, being the Prussian Noahide judge, or Noahide as it's called. With all the secret societies operational in your nation, so all the secret societies have been pushing that. The system itself claims supreme morality in all things spiritual and temporal, and claims right to enslave all the non-Babylonian blood under the Noahide regime, with the priesthood standing above the system and also the judge of everything beneath. On that basis alone, it's imperative we shine a light upon the families and organisations claiming the supreme throne of man, so we see if their claim matches their actions. The following is a transcript edited by myself, which I have for the last 3 days, of an interview with Jonathan Kaufman on the public life of 2 Baghdad families that made good in India, China, and then the British Isles. My book came out about a year ago, so this guy's written a book, The Last Kings of Shanghai. His video of the interview is underneath this report. He says, my book came out about a year ago and I feel a little bit like I've been living under a Yiddish curse, which is me, your book come out during a pandemic. What? Which is... So this is the guy speaking, and it was a transcript, so it might come out a bit funny. But I have edited it to make it make sense. But that doesn't make sense. So this guy thought he was living under a Yiddish curse because it came out during the pandemic when all the bookstores were closed. So it's nice to have events like this where I can really talk to people about the book directly and share with you some of the incredible history here. You know, people often ask me, how did you get interested in this topic? Because the whole idea of Jews in China is not something that kind of springs to mind as a possible topic, and it really started back in the late 1970s when I was right out of college and I was a young foreign correspondent in China and I was in Shanghai, and as I say, it was the late 1970s, and this was back when China was still Red China. Now Chairman Mao had died. So Mao had died. Just a few years before, there were far more bicycles than cars on the streets. Everybody was wearing those blue mouse suits, and we remember a kind of looking identical as they all walked around and did the work. And I was in Shanghai walking along the Bund, that famous waterfront area with the big Art Deco buildings, and I had to use a bathroom. And so I stepped into the hotel, and it was like walking into a 1930s movie set, where there were marble floors, beautiful chandeliers on the leak crystal wall fixtures. A bellhop, dressed in all white, came up to me when I asked him in English where the bathroom was. He responded to me in French. And so I left there thinking, this is an odd thing. What's this kind of slice of the 1930s glamour doing in the middle of communist China? And someone told me that this hotel had actually been built by a wealthy Jewish playboy, a man named Victor Sassoon, who had once been one of the richest men in the world, and had built this hotel, and his family had built synagogues. And the way reporters work, as we often are kind of filing away these stories, while rushing off to cover something else. And I took that one in the back of my mind. A few years later, I went back in Shanghai, and at that point we were all assigned minders. Embarrassing questions, and the kind of, tried to make sure that we only covered things they wanted us to cover. And this fellow said to me, he wanted to show me the children's place and the children's palace. Children's palace and the children's palace, he explained, was a place where Chinese parents would bring the children for violin lessons on the weekend and dance lessons, that kind of thing. So I thought, sure, that could be a nice little feature story. So I followed him, and once again, there was this incredibly incongruous scene. The children's place looked like an English manor house in the middle of Shanghai, surrounded by manicured lawns. It looked like something like out of Downton Abbey, not China. And I went inside, and sure enough, there were Chinese kids taking the music lessons, taking the dance lessons, but the inside of the house was magnificent. The ballroom was the size of a football field. There were sweeping staircases going up to the second floor. This had clearly been a grand house that someone had lived in at one point, and as I left, I noticed a small plaque right on the entry to the house which said, "This had once been the home of the Kadoorie family." Well, I knew the Kadoorie family because they were the richest Jewish family in Hong Kong, where I was living at the time. They were very prominent, very influential, very powerful, but I hadn't known that they had actually gotten their start in Shanghai, living in this magnificent mansion. A few years later, or after that, I got posted to Beijing as the Wall Street Journal's Beijing bureau chief, and my wife and I went over. We had 3 little kids at the time, and they loved going to Shanghai. Shanghai for them was exotic, it was exciting, and they loved exploring the city. And so one weekend we went to explore a kind of poorer part of the city, and as we walked down the alleyways past these tenements, I noticed that on the doorstep of one of these tenements there were the shadows of mezuzahs, not the businesses themselves, but the shadows of where they had once been. And once again I tried to make sense of this. What were these mezuzahs doing in the middle of Shanghai? I found out they were the mezuzahs that had been put there by some of the 18,000 Jewish refugees who had been saved in Shanghai from the Nazis and found refugees there. So all these kind of moments collected in my brain, and I decided at one point to find out what was going on. What was the story here? And the story took me to Baghdad. Now, we know the story. Most of us come from the story of Jews in Europe that living in Jews who were born into ghettos, very often discriminated against, and who gradually worked their way up through the 19th and 20th century to positions of prominence and wealth and academics. And throughout society, these Jews in Baghdad were different. These are the Jews actually that we read about in the Bible. In the Bible, where we read about the rivers of Babylon, where they wept when they remembered Zion. Babylon was Baghdad, and the Jews of Baghdad had been kidnapped by Nebuchadnezzar, who was a Chaldean king. There were 6 Chaldean kings in Babylon. So this is a lot of your really dark magic does appear to have root in the Chaldean traditions. After the destruction of the temple and taken as captives to Baghdad, and it was there that they began to live their life. Well, whether they were taken captive or not is a completely misnomer. It's not proven outside of the narrative. In fact, the Jews in Baghdad did extraordinarily well. They were very gifted in business and in commerce, and as a result they became a really elite class in Baghdad, and had so much financial and other successes that when they had the chance to return to Jerusalem, most of them decided not to go. They enjoyed the life that they had in Baghdad. They became so wealthy and influential that one family was named the head of the Jewish community, called the Prince of the Captivity. And this person was brought to meet on a regular basis with the rulers of Baghdad. Typically, they were Turks, Ottomans. Through the years, and whenever this head of the Jewish community was brought to meet the Pasha, he was carried on a sedan chair through the streets, and everybody, Jew or Gentile alike, would bow their head in reverence as he passed, because he was seen as this eminent person from this eminent family. That family was the Sassoon family. So that's their origins in Baghdad, very important. The Sassoons were the most successful traders in Baghdad. They had trading networks all throughout the Middle East and the Near East, and they consulted regularly with the Baghdad government, advising them almost like the Secretary of the Treasury. And there we have an image. This is David Sassoon and his sons. So you see what I've said in the past, this priesthood are not white, and they're not even Jewish. Yeah? They're not even Islamic. And yet, they're at the top of them all. The Magi. Okay, so you've got Abdullah and Elias, and there's David Sassoon. and this guy was sent over to England. Hence the tuxedo. But this guy Abdullah ended up changing his name to Albert, and he was knighted by Queen Victoria, as we'll see as we go. Now, as often happens in Jewish history, at a certain point in the early 1800s, things began to turn against the Jews. The rulers of Baghdad, the Turks, who ruled Baghdad, began to kidnap wealthy Jews and hold them for ransom. And this is how David Sassoon, who was 37 years old at the time, was preparing to take over his family dynasty. Instead, found himself in prison. His father rushed down to ransom him out, but he knew that things were not going to go well for the Jews, and so he wanted to get his family to safety. And so from the jail he gathered up his son, took him down to the waterfront, put him on a small boat, and set him away sailing from the Baghdad into safety. Before he sailed away, David Sassoon's father took a cloak that he had sewn into pearls and precious gems and draped that over his son's shoulders, so he would have something to start when he started his new life. Look what they've done there. They've played out Moses, stick him in a boat, and then go to many colours. In this case, diamonds and pearls. Can you see how they play it? And because you're in tune with the biblical narrative, you don't see the words that they say and you see the play on it. You go with the narrative and you're just constantly going along with these guys are Jewish. These guys are the Israelites. Yeah? Well, if you really knew the crack, the Jews were never Israelites. They were Judahites. So that's one gone. And that these people are sending the kids not into the way beyond. They're sending them to places where they're already networked. They're just moving out of the place they're in because they know it's going to go bad for them because they've been naughty. So when I took to the origin of the story, we all know the story of Fiddler on the Roof, and that's the story, tells the story of many of our parents, grandparents and great-grandparents. But I think the story of the Sassoons is in many ways almost Shakespearean. Well, it will be, if you go with the spiel. It is the story of an almost royal family of incredible power and influence that lost everything. No, they didn't. That's just for the game so they can disappear into the background. So let me just make this clear. It's important when we look at stuff like this. Not everybody with the name Sassoon, the name Kaduri, even the name Rothschild, etc., are playing in this game. If we take the Committee 300 example, that is a table made up of 300 chairs. In each chair stands the head of these big merchant families that have been going for a long time. But they change the names a lot so that the assets can be shifted somewhere else. Nobody can claim them back. This is exactly what they do with this stuff. They never lost anything. Everything they built continued to be in the network. They're just moving these front people about because they're already in the public eye. The hidden networks, as in Freemasonry and all the Jesuits, the secret societies, there's where the power is, and they're ultimately the beneficiaries of everything that goes on. So, almost Shakespearean. It's the story of an almost royal family of incredible power and influence that lost everything and spent the next century or two trying to get it all back. So David Sassoon leaves Baghdad, leaves his family, his wife, his children, and washes up in India. And he arrives in India just at the time when the British or the British colonialists are arriving in India and are about to make India a colony. Well, the Rothschilds were very involved in that. So, as I said, he weren't sent there and it was a coincidence. He was sent there to do his job as the East India were going in there to colonise. Because we use the term British only because they nicked the enzyme. The actual monster, the East India companies, were private. They had their own statutes, they had their own laws, and they could enforce their own laws in separation from anything British. Okay? That's not known as well about the East Indias, or widely known. David Sassoon looks around and he decides that Britain is the future, and that he wants to become part of the British Empire, even though he himself never learns English. He decides that he will embrace Britain. However, he's very successful as a businessman from the very start. Even though he's on his own, he has all the Sassoon networks. He has these gems he has sewn into his cloak, and he's able to get his family out of Baghdad to safety. In India, and he begins to trade, and within a few years has become a millionaire and is considered one of the leading businessmen in India. But he also decides that his children are going to be British. That's old Bombay, way back in the midst of time, 1826. That's where he's at. He enrolls them in British schools, he teaches them, brings in tutors to teach them English, and when Queen Victoria ascends to the throne, he insists that they all stand out on the waterfront of Bombay in their Arabic robes and sing God Save the Queen. Well, they're not Arabic robes, are they? Because these guys are from Baghdad. The Arabs are actually the Semites? No, we're not. Can you see how they play these games into these narratives? So this is, in my opinion, they are limiting the damage as this data starts to come out. Because it's so important that nobody looks at this no-hide and then looks at the families that are beneficiaries of it to see the contradictions in this, we're all moral and you lot are going to do what we say and we're going to judge you. Yeah, that's what's important in this adventure that we've been on for the last few live streams. He becomes very successful, and he also realises there's a great deal of money to be made in China and in opium now. Okay, opium. China at this point was still a closed country. It didn't want anyone coming in who did not have permission. Most of its cities were closed to foreigners, and the main reason for that was the British firms were dealing in opium and smuggling opium into China. Or, let's just say the East India Company was, but it was backed by the might of the British Navy. Opium was incredibly profitable as a very profitable business for these British firms, but the Chinese were very afraid of it. About this time, about 12% of China's population was addicted to opium. As a comparison, these days about 2% of Americans struggle with opioid addiction, and we know the kind of pain and suffering that the opioid addiction has caused in the United States and elsewhere. Well, imagine if it was 6 times as bad. This was the situation that China was facing, and so they really wanted to keep opium out of the country. But they did actually grow opium themselves. It had been a staple part of their culture for a very long time. Obviously, the East Indians were using it to undermine the country, so it was being pulled out there and moved for profit. The British companies saw enormous profits could be made, and so they lobbied the British government to essentially go to war with China over opium. These were the opium wars of the late 1830s and early 1840s, when British gunboats sailed into China, defeated the Chinese Empire and demanded that China open up its cities for trade. Hong Kong, Shanghai, Guangzhou, all the great cities of China, so the British could trade opium and eventually other products. There's a coat of arms of David Sassoon. You can't really see much about it on there. David Sassoon looked at this and he realised there was an incredible business opportunity to be made. He had 8 sons, and he essentially deployed his 8 sons across China to establish a beachhead for the family business, and the Sassoons became very successful in trading opium, in large part because they were technologically very innovative. Now, just to break here, what the intelligence operation back in Europe in the days of the Medici, so this is Holy See intelligence operation, was pretty much run by the Thurnham taxis, which seemed to disappear at the same time as the Medici. So again, they went underground and became something else to hide the fact that everything that the Medicis and such had was still actually in the hands of the same network. I sometimes think of China at this time would be like Silicon Valley of its time, where young men could go and make a fortune very quickly. The Sassoons decided to invest in steamships, and what that meant was that they could take the opium, which was grown in India, and get it into China faster than their British rivals, who were using sailing ships. Now you're starting to understand what the poppy is. All these wars have been about growing the opium and then moving the opium. They were the first family to invest in the telegraph, and that allowed all the sons of David Sassoon to communicate with each other and to communicate with their father back in Bombay and discuss what the price of opium was doing. Should they bring the ships now? Should they wait until the price rose? And because of these innovations of this kind of enterprisal thinking, within about 10 or 15 years, the Sassoon students were able to dominate the opium trade and to drive all their British rivals out of the business. So you're looking by 1850s, the opium trade in its entirety were not being run by the East India Companies, it were completely in the hands of the Sassoons. And if you follow that 8 sons, blah, 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 very taken off the Rothschilds, you know, they have these sons, they send them here and everywhere, blah, 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 blah. Same garbage story. Yeah, fairy tale. The communists in 1949 were able to conquer China. They seized the Sassoon business records in Shanghai, and I was able to see them. The Chinese concluded that the Sassoons probably made about $1 billion B for billion in profits from the opium trade, and that money was kind of used to buy properties, hotels, build factories, and so forth. You know, I think the whole question of opium is a difficult one, because certainly as Jews, many of us feel that the idea of Jewish values is something that's going to influence all your life and your business decisions as well. And we like to think of Jewish businessmen as being perhaps more immoral than others. Well, they're not Jewish, they're Babylonian. This is the thing. And their morality is everything they built, now that they're coming back as some kind of fantastic and that they're worthy to stand above the Noahide system. Clearly, their wealth were based on the demolition of an entire nation's society, i.e. China and opium, and also in India, which prompted them to end up into Burma, into Vietnam, then into Afghanistan. And all these wars in order that they can grow their opium in different places. Because the wars in a lot of cases are covers from moving the operations from one place to another, once they've incorporated the secret society networks in these nations. Yeah, then it's time to move on and do it somewhere else. Famed independence. Oh, you're independent now. No, you're not. You're independent of any governments, foreign, but you're certainly not independent of the Crown's secret power networks. Now, Edward VII. This is the guy, if we go with Greg Allert, that had Kitchener under his wing. So this is the guy that changed the mandate of Freemasonry from upholding England to upholding the then coming Israel. This is the guy that destroyed the House of Lords. That was his first attack on them, because he wanted to do peerages all over the show. He didn't get it in his time, but it did come after. So this is the guy that the Germans accused of being the architect of the First World War, although he'd gone before it actually took off. But this guy is given a lot of credence for all things bad. Why? Because this guy was stuck in the sack of the Sassoons and the Kaduris. Okay, these are the families that were dictating or influencing this fella. Bertie, Edward VII. Probably the worst monarch these islands have ever had. And I don't say that lightly. Now, this guy has a tie to Accrington, my hometown. He were banging two sisters here in Coney House. And most Thursdays, his Royal train would be parked up in Accrington train station while I went out and bagged the jolly two sisters. One got pregnant. The child was took to an orphanage or a convent in Ireland, and I haven't followed it through as to what happened after that. So this is why Accrington has been important, and so many of these mill owners were tied to Edward VII. I have my own theories as to why they took Accrington as important, but we'll leave that. One way the Sassoons became so influential is that they would entice members of the British aristocracy, including the Prince of Wales, because before, obviously, Edward VII was the Prince of Wales before he became king, after the death of Queen Victoria, including the Prince of Wales, to invest in opium. So they got him to invest in opium as a way for them to make a quick profit, as well, and so that what the Sassoons would say to me is that, opiate is like cigarettes or like alcohol. This was a vice, and the Chinese wanted it, and so the Sassoons saw it as a business decision. And while that's true, I don't think it tells the whole story. The Sassoons knew how dangerous opium was. They themselves never used opium, and in fact, while they were growing their opium trade, there were numerous efforts in London and the United States and elsewhere to stop the opium trade. Doctors would mobilise to speak out against it. So did you notice that? Britain and the United States, as in people, governments, civil states, were moving against it. But no, these Noahide beneficiary families were the ones keeping it going. Same with the slave trade. No different. Yeah, they managed to tie us into it. We fronted it. We're the scapegoat. Everything is scapegoat. Masonry is the fifth science. If you want to understand how the game works, you need to understand how they work, because that's what's moving everything. There will be campaigns to try and make the opium trade illegal, and when I went through the Sassoon business papers, they often are having to fire Chinese workers who would become, less hapless because they were addicted to opium. So the Sassoon sort of knew that what they were doing, and I think at some level, sadly, they sort of had a British or imperialist colonialist mindset, which is that the suffering was causing the Chinese didn't matter as much as them as the profits. Did you know this famous quote? I think it's from Balzac, who said, you know, behind every great fortune there's a great crime. And I think in the case of the Sassoons, that crime was opium. So as I mentioned, David Sassoon had 8 sons and he sent them across China, but he also soon realised that if they were going to succeed as a global dynasty, as a global business, they had to get a foothold in London. So he began to send his sons to London, where they were buying British manor houses. They enrolled their children in Eton, began to have these lavish parties where they would woo members of the British aristocracy and others. And in fact, the Sassoons became very close to the Prince of Wales, Queen Victoria's son, who was Edward VII, who had a gambling habit, which this assumes kind of gave him money so he could gamble it away. And they would go on rescues with him to various spas around Europe, and they became quite influential both in the government and among the royal family of Buckingham Palace. In fact, when the Prince of Wales became King Edward VII, especially so. In the early 1900s, Winston Churchill, who knew the Sassoons from all these parties, wrote to a friend and said, I wonder if the King is going to bring his Jews with him to Buckingham Palace. Now, as I mentioned, Abdullah changed his name to Albert and was given the freedom of city in 1873. Previous to that, 1872, he was knighted by Queen Victoria. So not only did they have the clothes into Edward when he was king and as prince, they also had the clothes into Victoria, which would be correct given, if we go with Greg's info, she was a child sired by the Rothschilds. I mean, this was a sign of both how influential the Sassoons were, but also of the kind of anti-Semitism that they ran into, where the British wanted to do business with and they wanted to eat their food. How can it be anti-Semitism? These guys are from Baghdad, from Babylon. See how they misuse the terms. It fixes you into that presumption fantasy world you live in, because you're not actually focused to what is before you. You see the food and enjoy the hospitality, but there was still a kind of social anti-Semitism. In fact, when I would read many of the diaries of the British aristocrats, they would describe going to these incredible parties the Sassoons held, but then saying I would never let them into my house. I would never want to associate with these Jews. By the late 19th century, or by around 1900, the Sassoons were incredibly influential in England, but they were losing people. They were losing sort of the talent that needed to run the company. In India, most of the sons had moved to England at this point, and one of the remaining ones in Bombay died unexpectedly. And at this point, I want to talk a little more about the women in the Sassoon family, and also the Kaduri family, because I think the story of women in history, but especially in history from the 19th and 20th century, is often forgotten. And it's really fascinating looking at how women fared in these families. So when one of the Sassoon sons died in Bombay, the family was thrown into crisis. They didn't know who was going to run things, because all the other sons were in London living the life and hanging out with the king and spending money, but not earning it. So at this point, Flora Sassoon, who was the wife of the Sassoon brother, who died, basically said she offered to run the family business in Bombay for a few years until her son, who was a teenager, came of age and she could kind of resume the male line of succession. And her brothers-in-law in London thought that it was fine, because they thought, well, you know, she's a woman and she'll be a caretaker. We'll be able to control her, and then, you know, things will go back to the way they should be when her son takes over. So this girl, Farah, is her real name, and her husband was called Suleiman. And their wedding was in Bombay in 1876, and obviously to anglicise, she's called Flora. So that's a picture on your left in Bombay, and on your right when she's gone back to London and became quite an important socialite. Yeah. Not Western, are they? Not by any means. As it turned out, Flora Sassoon was a brilliant businesswoman. She was very well educated, she spoke several languages, but extremely well read. And it turned out also had an incredible gift for business. Now this was at a time when women didn't have the vote, they literally couldn't be seen in public. In India, they lived behind what was called purdah. And so Flora Sassoon began running this global empire from her living room. But gradually she began to step out more, and it was considered somewhat scandalous. But she began to go to the Sassoon offices, visiting the Sassoon factories, putting a public face of a woman in charge of this big company. And in fact, in the time, much like what we've been going through ourselves, the bubonic plague came to Bombay. And the Sassoon workers were so terrified about getting sick that they refused to go to work. And this really threatened the stability of the family business. And get this, chaps. And so Flora Nightingale reached out and paid for several European scientists to come to Bombay to find a vaccine for the bubonic plague. And they succeeded. So they're using the term, they're involved in the medical, and they're presenting it as a saviour. When I think we might all have a completely different idea of what's actually going on here. So they've got this going on in India now. Then Flora insisted that she be given the vaccine first. Live on telly. Of course, they didn't have a telly then. It was live in front of maybe the Taj Mahal. I don't know. But Boris, Biden, they've all been there and they come on, get me stuck here, go on, lads, go on. This is where it comes from, folks. It's a script. And it doesn't change. They don't change it because it works. So then Flora insisted she be given the vaccine first, and even more dramatically, then a photograph to be taken of her with her sleeve rolled up getting the shot. So workers could see that the vaccine was safe and they should take it. And again, the idea of wealthy British women rolling up her sleeve, in public and having a photograph taken as she got the vaccine was shocking to many people in India. But it worked. The workers trusted the vaccine. They began coming back to work, and the Sassoon fortune in many ways was saved by what Flora did. But all her actions began to make her brothers-in-law very nervous. They realised that this was not a woman who's easily controlled. She wouldn't just be marionette. She wouldn't do what they wanted her to do, and so they essentially stayed a boardroom coup and kicked her out of the company. And they took complete control again. Flora Sassoon ended up sailing to England and settled there. She became a very well-known philanthropist and a Jewish scholar, but she never set foot in the Sassoon business again. As a friend of mine said, she hit the bamboo ceiling, the point at which, a woman cannot rise. So there's a couple of links there that take us a bit more in depth on these families. And now we're getting into Kadoorie. And there's one image here. So there's, you've got David Sassoon, 1864. Yeah, I mean, you look at Shabbatai Zevi, Eliphaz Levi, all these so-called Jewish folk that are nothing of the sort. They're Chaldean priests, black magic. There's the dress. Abdullah, who looked like that in the other one, now looking like look, they've even made him white. Look, there's all this nonsense. They've made him white. Nothing of the sort. Abdullah and his Albert, 1896. Elias, 1880. And Flora in 1936. And now we've got the Victor Sassoon. He was like the playboy, a bit David Niven looking, weren't he? His character. Another woman who's fascinating around this time is Laura Kadoorie, nee Makotta. Married to Eli Kadoorie. See, these Makotta, another of these Magi families, these Babylonian families. But I think they came out of Portugal, the Makotta. So it were all going on everywhere. Everywhere these imperial forces have been and set off from, these networks were put in there first. Now the Kadoories are on the other family that I write about in my book, and they were from Baghdad as well. And they had originally worked for the Sassoons. As the Sassoons expanded their empire in China, they needed people they could trust to work with, and so the Sassoons sent back to Baghdad that if teenage families wanted to send their teenage boys to India, the Sassoons would trade them and give them an education, give them apprenticeship and accounting or other business skills, send them to China, give them a job, but only that they were building Jewish hospitals, Jewish synagogues, so that the Jewish employees from Baghdad would be able to, if they got sick, and get medical care and get an education. And they built Jewish cemeteries, so in case they died, they would have Jewish burial. Isa Brothers, they're doing that for the British Raj. Yeah? All this system that we've just looked at there, bring your kids in, we'll educate them, give them jobs, build your mosques, build your thing. This is what they're doing via the Indian Raj. Exactly that system. So that's who they're working for. The Babylonian system. Muslims take note, because you're not Muslims following this. You can fear, regardless of what bullshit and how much crying you might want to push out there. Go back to what I said originally. Look at what's before you. Apply reason and logic, and don't come away from that paragraph until you fully comprehend the words there not the bollocks you think it's talking about. Then you'll stay on track. Laura Kaddouri descended from Portuguese Jews. The Kaddouri Mecca Haim Synagogue in Oporto is named in her and Eli's honour. She died in 1919 in dramatic conditions. Ellie died in 1944. Both Ellie and Laura's graves are located in Song Qinglan Memorial Park near Hongguakou Road, Shanghai. And there we have Ellie Kaddouri, 1864. His mum and dad Silas and Rima. And then we have Lady Laura Makota. Father Samuel, Mother Miriam. Yeah. Shanghai, China. Yeah. 1864 and born in 1859, respectively. They had children, Lloyd Lawrence Kaddouri of Hong Kong, Victor Kaddouri, Sir Horace Kaddouri. Now, Hong Kong, these are the families running. This is the family running Hong Kong, Kaddouri, still today, and when the hand transfers eat both sides. So they're the ones in there. So if you're a Muslim and you're coming out of Hong Kong, as Ilyas Khan was back in the day and took over Accrington Stanley, it wasn't personal. I was merely presenting to my fellow countrymen what you represented. All right, whether you knew it or not. But this is what we get into. You see, these are the families that are dictating everything. Many families in Baghdad saw that this was a way to kind of bring money home to their families who had fallen on hard times in Baghdad. And so the Kaddouri family had been upper middle class. Their father had died and they'd fallen on hard times, and so Laura Kaddouri decided to send several of her sons to Bombay to work for the Sassoons. Ali Kaddouri was 18 years old when he arrived in China. He was 15 years old when he left Baghdad. So just imagine what it must have been like for a 15-year-old boy to leave Baghdad, leave everything he knew to go to work and be trained in Bombay, and then at 18 found himself in a small town in China. Eli Kaddouri didn't speak Chinese. He had never been to China before, and yet suddenly realised there was enormous potential to make money in China. It was this kind of gold rush that was going on, and so he quit the Sassoons and began working on his own, making his way down into Hong Kong and investing. And by the time he was 30, he had been a millionaire. Become a millionaire, and like many young men, decided it was time to find a wife. So he sailed to London and met Laura Makota. And she was from a prominent Jewish family, a wealthy Jewish family, and the two of them fell in love and got married, and she was from Portugal. But he didn't go on his own. He used the network that were already there, and they decided, obviously, we could divide this and you can do it. You can do this side of things. So, again, fronts for fronts, just like the billionaires are fronts today. Now, typically at the time that would have happened, she would have gotten pregnant, Ali would have returned to China to make his fortune and develop his business. He would have come home maybe a couple of times a year to visit his children. But Laura was a very different kind of woman. She travelled. She was in fact older than Ellie, and her family was worried that she was going to become a spinster. But she was very spirited, and after she married Eli, she announced she was going to go back to China with him, and so the two of them sailed back to Hong Kong. She quickly gave birth to 2 boys, and then even more remarkably, she announced that she was going to travel around China with her husband while he did his business deals, and luckily for me, she actually kept a diary. She kept a diary for about 15 years that kind of tracked all the things that she saw, the poverty she saw, the civil war that was turning China apart, in ways in which Chinese people were suffering. And in many ways, I think she became conscious of the Kaddouri family. So again, they're prepping you for another blaggy or another heroine, when in reality, there's another agenda behind it. We'll just have a look at this. This is just a communication from David Sassoon to one of his Sulman, I think. To my cherished brother and my dear blah blah blah, Sulman Sheikh David Sheikh Sassoon. May God protect him and give a long life, Hong Kong. With regard to cotton, you must send someone from the office whom you fully rely on to check the weighing of cotton. Even if you are tired of this, it must be done. Also, please make sure you respond to all letters from business associates. I have received an allocation of 240 chests of opium, Benares type. I purchased them at an expensive price of 1390 rupees per chest, but I believe it will be profitable. We received a telegraph today from Bombay that a shipment of 2,000 chests of Malwi opium on its way. May God help with such a quantity. We think the market will drop due to such high supply. With regard to silk, we should each purchase our own allotment. It seems silk would be profitable. the young David Sassoon. Yeah, me God, what God is running around fucking people up on opium? Yeah, you can't. You've got to see what you're reading here, or at least accept that the God you're into when you're following all these and going, oh, yeah, fucking lovely, what a beautiful story. At least know that you're in the dog shit. While the husband was off doing the business deals, Laura concluded that one of the reasons China was suffering so much was that there was so much poverty and much pain among the Chinese. The girls didn't have a chance to get an education. Here we go. Now they're going to set up education. But they're going to do it to the girls. Yeah, so she goes, she's building education, educating the females. So we're not going to read it all now, we'll just flip through it. The Kaduris eventually settled in Shanghai in a beautiful mansion there, and one day a fire broke out and Lord of Kaduri ran out. She was convinced the government was the Chinese, blah, blah, blah. So basically, she died. But did she? And she done it, served the purpose of she went somewhere else, probably. So that was a blow to the Kaduri family, they say, blah, blah, blah. Who would run into a burning building to save a Chinese servant. But can you imagine how it affects Chinese people? These people are wonderful. These people are angels while they're getting everybody smacked out on heroin. You know what I'm saying? They're clever. Now the next one would be Victor Sassoon. He were from England originally. Hang on, let me go on. They were made used to come. Now the Sassoons at this point were very popular in England. They were very popular in China. They were spreading across the world. And it's at this point I want to introduce Victor Sassoon. If there ever is a movie that's going to be made about this book, Victor Sassoon is going to be the star. Victor Sassoon was born in Europe, went to Cambridge and was a charming rogue. He was considered one of the most eligible bachelors and playboys in London. When he was growing up, he was at Cambridge, one of the best wine cellars in Europe. He was always seen with chorus girls in each charm. He loved going to races and everyone thought Victor Sassoon would be one of the Sassoons who would spend a lot of money, but would never really show much interest in business. But during World War I, he was a fighter pilot and his plane crashed and he became crippled. He lost use of his legs and he fell into a depression and basically concluded he would not be able to have the kind of grand social life he'd envisioned that he had so looked forward to because of his disability. So he decided to go to India and China to see if there were anything in the family businesses that he might be able to do. As it turned out, he had a brilliant knack for business and he very quickly decided to move all the Sassoon money out of India and to move it to Shanghai. And he almost single-handedly turned Shanghai into one of the most glamorous cities in the world. So Charlie Chaplin, Noel Coward, Laurence Olivier, all these people were in his circle. Now, if you know anything about Charlie Chaplin, so political, this guy. Now you know where he got it from. This is his circle, Victor Sassoon. Wallis Simpson, the woman who they attached to Edward VIII, who abdicated, again seen in this scene. So there are all these big effects against our royalty and changing our system, England, to back in Israel, back in Noahide. It's all coming through these players, coming from this network. Here's just a few descriptions of what made the Sassoons successful. It says, the Sassoons advanced in global trading, fiercely guarding the family's reputation, creating an impressive information system, using coded language, taking advantage of arbitrage opportunities. He would have these extravagant parties in his hotel where he would dress up as a ringmaster and all the people he had to dress up as circus acts. So this guy was wooing all the aristocrats everywhere and the stars in Shanghai. Shanghai was occupied by the British, by the Americans, the Japanese, and at that point by the French and by others. It essentially didn't have a functioning government. And what that meant was that if you made it to Shanghai, you would be safe. So as word spread, especially in Vienna and Berlin, middle-class Jews, doctors, lawyers, merchants, musicians, professors began to sell their belongings for whatever they could to book a passage on these cruise ships, and that would take them to Shanghai, and ultimately 18,000 of them made their way to Shanghai and began, just to imagine what that was like here, or these Jews who at one moment living in Vienna, they're living in Berlin, they're dressed up in the known German clothes, and then suddenly arrive in Shanghai on these ships where no one speaks English or German, they don't speak Chinese, there's incredible poverty, people literally dying in the streets as these Jews came in. It was a terrifying prospect for them, but a real dilemma for Victor Sassoon and the Kaduri family. What were they going to do with these Jewish refugees? And much to their credit, both families stepped up and they began to turn Victor Sassoon. So they all got excited in there. So Hitler played a big game, didn't he, in shifting these systems everywhere. Advantages in global trading continued, allying with the British, cultivating officialdom whenever they operated, establishing charities and understanding of local culture, taking advantage of global phenomena, wars, trade agreements, free trade ideology. Yeah, charities. Can you see where it all comes from? Victor soon turned several of his buildings into dormitories for the refugees. He hired many of them. Kaduri set up school for refugees' children, which included, as it turned out, people like Michael Blumenthal. So when you look at your free schools that they've been doing here, this is to move this system, but of course they're using Muslims today, or mainly Pakistanis and Indians, and of course now we've got a massive influx of Kurds from Iran and Iraq. We've got also a big Kurdistan, Azerbaijan, all coming in here, and of course the ones that we're really concerned about, with good reason, are the Albanians. So there you can see this is the same games that they use everywhere. Set up these things, and then Hitler come along, and then they completely and utterly turn what they've created into like mini Israels. Well, not Israels, because these guys are not tied to anything other anything of the like of Israel, apart from the fact that they've built it and they're using it as a fire starter and the means to secure all the tech from the West to hand it over to Bolshevik Russia and now capitalist China, or more fascist China, fascist capitalism. Because capitalism isn't the problem, it's incorporation. First incorporate your name with surname, etc. Blah, blah, blah. It was also like the Victor Sassoon pulling these Japanese, and Japanese are involved here as well. Remember they took over Japan when you see that in Tom Cruise's film The Last Samurai. It was the same networks, but mainly it was the Rothschilds, because it was coming via the British Empire, and they got the Emperor to go with this at the expense of the old system, and that's what Tom Cruise's film is sort of depicting, just on the back of having wiped out Native Americans, especially Custer's Last Stand and such. So that, you know, they move, they do the bit here, then they shift them over here to do it again over here, blah, 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 blah. And that's basically been the last 400 years once they started building these, not colonial enterprises at first, the trading organisations that would become the East Indies, and then they'd shift into colonisation or imperial forces, all controlled by these families. Yeah? And then they take up a nation, and then they put that in the scapegoat position. To history, it was the nation. Yeah? Which, I mean, you're taking part of it. I'm not claiming innocence. What I'm saying is, you start to understand this, and you can see that it lets everybody off the hook, because we've all been deceived. In regards to culture, because of your religion, everything you've been shoved down your neck today is bullshit, and you're sucking it up. Today, the Kaduris are still in Hong Kong, even under the Chinese rule. They are the richest Western family in China. They're worth about $13 billion. Yeah, right. Worth a lot more than that. And I think, like a lot of Westerners, they're now wondering what will happen in Hong Kong, what will happen to China, as history kind of swerves. But it doesn't really matter, because these people stand above the politics of all nations, don't they? They're running the finance, they're running the trade, the monopolies. Yeah, and now they've decided to take it off us. They're playing with the food chain, they're playing with shipping, they're playing with all the networks that they, again, control. Why wouldn't they control shipping? It's a law of it unto itself, isn't it? You know, they're off land. This is why the empire, it really exists on the sea. But of course now today, and on their islands, the treasure islands, you know, if you're looking for where the real wealth is, well, you're certainly not going to find it in London, in Washington, not even in the Vatican. You're going to find it on the treasure islands across the globe. Again, Kaduras are into opium. Everything that they've done, these people were built on opium, on finance, on war and debt. This is what this Babylonian system represents. And we don't need to go through it all. You get the picture. So I've put that up as a report. I'll put that up here after if you want to just follow it through. And it is worth a look. And some of the links are quite interesting as well. Because it sort of expands the insight you might want to get into that. And we're at 2 hours and 11, so I'll go through what you guys have said. You guys are still talking court. Well, I don't blame you. They can check reg on a car, they can check your voting register. The roads and vehicles is so important. If we can destroy that, you destroy the game. Because everything revolves around them, being able to see where you are on the highways, plus your phone. We should get to a point where you can keep your phone at home, but when you go out in your car, you've got a burner phone. Stuff like that. So when you're going out, Google's not in your pocket. All this system isn't interacting with you. Do you get what I'm saying? In your house, fine. You want to go on internet, fine. Do what you're doing. You know what they're doing. But do you have to have Google in your pocket everywhere you go? I'd say the answer to that is a big no. And it might mean you miss calls. Because when you get home, you're going to have your calls on there. Does it matter? Your close friends will have your number on your burner. All other business can be taken care of at home as though it's your office and you're out. You're not available. It wouldn't be difficult to do, and it'd be good practice to actually move against this system. Just like your birth certificate, no one can say it's you, only you can say it's you. Exactly, only you can claim to be surety for it. And that's based on ignorance and a blag. And that blag is formed, basically, as I started off, by not accepting reality. You've got your map in your own mind, but does that map fit the territory out there in real time? Your map's built in law land. And it can get you along aloof on certain things and get you away in life without getting stuck into things you don't need to get stuck into. But when it comes to making fundamental decisions in your life, you don't want to be acting on the map. You want to be making sure that the map in your head is an exact copy of the real terrain, the world out there. Yeah. I didn't know these were poppy wars. Everything's a poppy war. Since we started with the opium. And they used it in Egypt. You go back in ancient times, the same things. It's all a repeat. You've got to go with this idea now because it's pretty solid that we have periods of destruction. And that's what they've kept off the public platform because, of course, they work to that. They couldn't get any of the blags of religious tradition, gods and goddesses together and keep it solid if you understood that every now and again it all blows up, goes tits up. They wouldn't be able to. These systems that they use today, religions, societies, secret societies, all these things, they only work because you think there's a continuum from start to finish, and that there's no destructions. You think there's just a flood. It's all bullshit. Everything that you hold dear is garbage. But the truth of it is in there. That's where you're breaking the spell of the word wizardry comes in. The more you can do that, the better you're going to improve and expand your viz when you're dealing in this world. Now they just go into Afghanistan, yep. But I mean, Afghanistan's growing your medical opium. Because the biggest problem you've got with smackheads isn't smackheads out on the street. It's all your medheads. What is it? Staying silent. It's the same thing. Yeah. Tacit agreement. Shortly after that, the epidemic. It's all the poppy is about. Yeah, they say, oh no, when you blow up the fields with a cannon after the poppies grow. I do say they might do. But the poppy is the currency of the empire. Or is the main. I mean, obviously I think owning the cashes now. But before they got the central banks operational, giving you fiat currency and fractional reserve currencies, you know, you put £10 in bank, they invent the bank. See, people blame governments, and they do, and I've said this before. The governments don't print your money. The government's there to regulate these systems. So the governments aren't regulating these systems. That's the only involvement the government has in the financial game. They're controlling the tax take and then decide, well, they're not even doing that now. The bankrupt administration setup is administrating the money. So the government are not printing the money. The government are not regulating because the corporations are telling the government what to do. The billionaires, the cabinet, the Privy Council, inner city, all they see, Babylonian priesthood. Yeah, that's the hierarchy of this. Committee of 300 is below that. Rothschilds are the court financiers for these trading families. Above the Committee of 300, because the Committee of 300 is the table of merchants. Yeah, so it's important as well. We look at these names. Not everybody that's Sassoon, Kaduri, Dangur are involved in this. But you can bet your life they'll join it as quick as they can if they think there's some cash involved. Yeah, the trust that they set up around these families, or what do the Italians call them, the fondi. It's that's the power. All these families, you're playing a role in building it bigger and keeping it together. You're just playing roles in it, you know. And the most insane psychopathic families, in truth, are the guys that put their man on the Committee of 300's table. So yeah, the Sassoons are connected along with L'Oreal. They all are. You know what I'm saying? And you've got to also remember, a lot of these names that go back into ancient times, the name stealers, we need to start to reckon with that and just how big that action that they used to do could have played into all these names that we see that they're not. They might have been at one point, but these name stealers have took them on. You know, and that's your 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, maybe 1700s up to you get Catherine the Great and what they did in the Balkans and the Mongol areas. You get me? You get what I'm saying? So yeah, wait till next year, June. What's happening next year in June? Yeah, but mind racing, why make it easier for them? Why have Google in your pocket everywhere you go? Because it's interacting with all the masts, all the signs, all the lampposts, everywhere they've got these receiving tech to get into your phone because of the apps you've put in, collecting data. Why do you have to have that on you? If you don't have a smartphone on you, mind you, I suppose if you're in a new car, your system's doing it. Which is why I keep the ones without all that garbage in, the sat-nav stuff. But if you're, like me, I'm not in a sat-nav car. They only know where I am because of the phone. But think of all the abilities they don't have that they have in a smartphone. They don't have that in a burner phone. There's a lot they can't collect, a lot of data. And the mics aren't as powerful as the ones in the smartphones, which means they can't pick you up at distance. So if you're on a chat, stuff like that. These are just things that I use. It's counterintelligence, that's all. Because there's no point getting too excited about it all, because they've got you, like you said, everywhere. But you can limit their ability and keep them guessing. Gods of the Puppet or Hypnos and Kronos. I don't know. I'd have said more Dionysus, the cult of Dionysus. Pan. Because you're mushrooms there, aren't you? You're doing the shrooms. I mean, if you want to see the gnomes, you have to take the right shrooms. Rob Brack sells a de-googled phone. Right, Pine phone. I have on my Facebook. There's a Pine phone and there's another phone, and there's 3 that I've found. So what you do, the Linux, you put in that phone what you want. You're off. They're going to have your location, but then they have to locate you as attached to that phone, which they gain through their apps because you're signing in. So there are phones available. You just have to know how to use Linux, because you're basically creating your own phone. They're available. They're not a secret. They're there. We covered it at the Pine phone when we did that Dark Metaverse vid, and I've found 2 more since, and I've definitely put them on my face ache. You don't need your phone. Rob Bratchell sounds D Google. I'm beginning to think we're in a sim. Holographic universe is what I'd say. Definitely. I don't know whether it's a sim per se, because it would have to be a copy, an exact copy, wouldn't it? But in the original creation, they made man in their image. They didn't say they were making the earth, the heavens, in the image of their pad, did they? They just said they made man in their image. And I don't just think that means in our shape. It means our capacities, the senses we have, what we are as a machine in this place, in this holographic universe. We have all the capacities that they had, is what I think the image necessarily means. It's not just talking about what your body looks like. You know what I'm saying? Images are wider, descriptive than just pulling it down to look at me, I'm a short ass kind of thing. So, can you have a landline? It really does not matter. They have higher graded technology. Yeah, and I accept that, and I'm not asked. But if I'm doing stuff that I don't want anybody to know, no phone comes with me. I won't use my car, and I'll be in the middle of some countryside, and you cover your lips. They ain't going to hear anything unless they get military grade marks anywhere near. So you don't want to be anywhere near any masts either. Yeah? I forgot. It means you have to get up and do something. You see, people don't think in them terms anymore because they're always looking for easiest. That's a program that everybody's had. Convenience is king. You know, people now can't be asked to go to Costa, can't be asked to go to McDonald's. They're getting Just Eats. Who's getting the money off them Just Eats? Yeah, the Sassoon networks using Islam. You know, if you don't start thinking like that, then you're not going to recognise that you're actually funding and building it. You know? Anyway, not your phone, it's business phone. Your prime caretaker of trust property. To roll your life avoid is the hole-in-one holography. Well, I mean, I said I studied all Eastern stuff way back in the day. Vedas, Bhagavad Gita. I even studied the Popol Vuh. All at the same time, these, for about 3 years, Buddhism, the Buddhist teachings, or what they originate from. And it's pretty clear that system is just showing you the interplay of electromagnetism, sound, light, ether, and the electrical currents as the interplay, and they give it a face and a name. It's pretty much what they're describing. That's what I learned back then, and I've not seen anything or studied anything that would change that. So it doesn't matter if it's flat, oblong, square, triangle. In a holographic universe, it has to work. It can't not work. It's the science, the physics that we've been given that are full of shit and that have led us down a path of ignorance so that we can't see. I mean, it doesn't matter, does it? In an holograph, you just think of it as a computer game. What's going on in there? Is it flat? Is it round? No, we know it's just a load of codes. But when you're looking at it, it's showing you 3D, isn't it? The same thing. It's actually irrelevant whether it's flat or round because it's a hologram. And whatever science could show you is, in a holographic universe, it would work anyway because it's programmed to work. So if you go upside down and it's programmed correctly, you couldn't fall down if you tried. It'd be impossible. You know, so it doesn't matter, does it? It's not important. Some of the data that they brought to the fore about uprooting the heliocentric, is interesting. You know, it's incorporated mud floods, it's incorporated all this stuff that we pretty much didn't concentrate on before as a truth seeking movement. So yeah, all interesting stuff, isn't it? You know, so yeah, Trina's having some problems, I believe. I don't know whether anybody can help, but I will gonna. She has sent me an email, but I've been busy on this. I will communicate with her in the week. But if anybody knows her, there's a bit of trouble going on there. She might need a bit of help. Not her personally. I think it's for a friend. So, chaps and chapesses, on the last Sunday before before the Christmas comes down the old chimney. So if you've got a wood burner, make sure you turn it off, because you'll be burning his bottom. I'm going to say to you, it's been a pleasure as always, and last one before Christmas. Till the next time.
electronic engineering.